Looking for an epic charter fishing experience that goes beyond the boat? Want to add in world-class food, festivals, or even football? Come explore everything Louisiana has to offer with a charter fishing trip led by one of Louisiana's top captains. From inshore redfish and speckled trout to offshore tuna and red snapper, from saltwater swordfish to freshwater sac-a-lait. With fishing destinations less than 45 minutes from the airport, Louisiana has something spectacular to offer every fisherman. Go catching with Louisiana's best captains today by planning your next adventure at louisianacharterfishing.com. That's louisianacharterfishing.com.
Hunting is not easy. It never has been. It takes dedication, motivation, a lot of patience, and quality gear. If you manage a food plot, put up stands, or need just one more game camera, we can help at MidwayUSA.com. We opened our doors in 1977 and continue to put customers first by offering super fast, same-day shipping. For just about everything for the outdoors, go to MidwayUSA.com.
In this episode, we're diving into a question that sits right at the crossroads of ecology, culture, hunting tradition, and plain old human bias. Why do we villainize some invasive species while celebrating others? Think about it. Axis deer run wild through parts of Texas and Hawaii and are treated like gold. Premium table fare, guided hunts, trophy photos. Meanwhile, feral hogs, also introduced, get labeled as pests, problems, and biohazards. Ringneck pheasants, a completely introduced bird, are the poster child of upland hunting. But mute swans and European starlings, people either call them nuisances or stick up for their existence here despite the damage they do to local ecosystems. Today we're breaking down why the reputations of introduced animals vary so wildly, and how history, culture, and perception shape the way we value or despise introduced species living on the wild landscape. This will close out the invasive species series, so grab a drink, grab a seat, and stay tuned.
Join Justin Townsend and the Harvesting Nature crew as they explore the world of cooking wild fish and game while sharing recipes, tips, tricks, and lessons learned from their pursuit of wild food. We sure hope you ate before the show, 'cause you're gonna leave hungry. This is the Wild Fish and Game Podcast.
So, in the other episodes of the series, we focused on invasives ranging from reptiles to birds to plants and fungi. Today, we're shifting gears to something more philosophical: human perception. Why do some introduced species become beloved game animals while others get treated like ecological villains? Pheasants, chukars, sika, axis deer, stock trout, feral hogs, Barbary sheep. We're asking one big question. What makes an invasive species celebrated or condemned? Adam, over to you.
Yeah, so before we split things into mammals, birds, and fish, we need to talk about the elephant in the room, sometimes literally, I guess, maybe not in North America. Humans tend to judge invasive animals through three distinct lenses. First is their cultural value. So if grandma made pheasant casserole, pheasants are tradition, not invaders. But if feral hogs wreck your pasture, they're destroyers, not game. Second is economic value. Axis deer, big tourism dollars. Feral pigs, big agricultural losses. It really changes the way we look at them. Third and last is ecological impact. So some introduced species blend into ecosystems fairly quietly, like the pheasant. Others, like hogs or carp, reshape entire landscapes or waterways. So what's funny is that the public rarely cares about actual ecological impact. And you can see this in the way the public votes on hunting-related topics. They only care about the story around the animal. So a charismatic species gets a pass, while a destructive or ugly species gets the boot. With that in mind, let's dive into some different groupings of animals, invasive animals we got here.
So, let's start with the big crowd pleasers, mammals. Some of the most beloved game species in North America are not native at all. Axis deer, sika, nilgai, Barbary sheep, feral pigs, Siberian boars, European hare, feral goats. Some are pests, some are trophies, some are delicacies, and the public perception treats each one completely different. And this also varies wildly state to state on how they're classified. And even you've got North American natives in some states that are not in others, and then they become introduced and then become part of that loose quotes population. There's some weird conversations surrounding the classification of elk in Texas. It always has been rather odd that Texas has been hesitant to classify some of their western or northwestern elk herds as native, because then that would change the status of elk throughout the state, which also brings about another very interesting conversation when you think about mammals. When you look at the American buffalo or the bison, bison in many states is categorized as livestock, and it's not treated under the game laws. But recently, Colorado has recategorized bison to two separate distinct varieties. You've got your agriculture bison, so your city bison, and then you've got your wild bison, and those primarily are wandering from the wild herds that exist in Wyoming, but Colorado has recognized that there's value in treating them as game animals and managing them as game versus treating them as livestock. And a lot of that conversation, if you dig deep into it, can be quite controversial when you look at the perception of the cattle ranching industry towards buffalo, which a lot of stones are thrown at them for their alleged contributions of brucellosis into western herds of livestock to potentially decimate herds. I'm not quite sure the magnitude of the effects of that, but I think through a lot of conversations, a lot of those brucellosis concerns exist not actually in the herds of the buffalo, but actually in the herds of cattle, not transmitted as holistically as believed by the buffalo, but still a narrative that shapes what is viewed as native versus invasive, to the extent that cattle themselves are in fact invasive to North America as well. But Adam, let's walk through a little more as we peel back this layer.
Yeah, let's start with mammals. We have some celebrated introductions of mammals, including axis deer, sika deer, nilgai, even the European hare. We like to call these like the ringneck pheasants of the mammal world, just because they're so celebrated. They're animals that people often want on the landscape, despite the fact that they're not from the landscape. Most of these animals are brought over intentionally for hunting estates or game farms, where if they've escaped or were released, tend to be delicious. They're fun to hunt. They draw tourism dollars. And that means they have value, and that value sticks. In Texas, axis deer are practically treated as a native game species. No one complains when they see a herd of axis deer, that's for sure. We also have something that's a little different, kind of sits outside everything, is feral horses, which we've talked about before. They're the poster child of the Wild West and of just general American freedom. Wild horses are culturally treasured, despite the fact that they're invasive and undoubtedly damaging ecosystems. And also considering that most people don't even have a real connection to horses these days, like actual horses. How many people do you know own horses? Like they're out there for sure, but not that many. So it's funny that people have this deep connection to these wild horses without often ever have seen them or owning a horse or having any kind of connection to horses other than movies. Still, despite that, any mention of controlling them or eradicating them will get a massive and often vitriolic public response, which happened to us when we just posted an article about it without any opinion really in the article, just talking about the possibility of starting, hunting for horses to help control their population, which is expanding. We got a lot of response to that, and it wasn't all that friendly. So people really have an emotional response to some of these animals. So those were the celebrated ones. What about the villains? We'd like to say, feral hogs or wild boars, including the Siberian boar, the combination of which makes the super pig that's coming out of Canada. You got to watch out for those Canadian pigs.
Yeah, they're cold-blooded. They can survive.
Yeah.
Survive in places that I don't even want to walk around, so
yeah,
they can stay there.
We also have Nutria, which we talked about before as well. A little invasive rodent that does a ton of big damage. When the public sees these animals, they see that damage. Rooted fields, destroyed wetlands, busted fences, overgrazed ranges. Their hunting value doesn't really outweigh their ecological reputation, but there's a funny thing that happens when people don't live with the day-to-day destruction of these pests. Many northern hunters, and a lot of people I've talked to, have expressed that they wished feral hogs would move into their locale so then they could also hunt them, because they're jealous of the Texans who are, I don't know, firing at helicopters and stuff at them. In this case, the villain suddenly becomes a trophy when it's rare or hard to find. So a lot of these perceptions really shift, and like Justin said, from state to state, country to country, province to province, views really, really shift on it. If you're not living with that destruction all the time, it just seems like another cool animal to go hunt, but you're not bringing in to play like the billions of dollars that pigs cause. In between the villains and the heroes, we have the neutral zone mammals. So some introduced ones like goats and sheep in Hawaii, bighorn, aoudad overlap in the southwest, a lot of urban rabbits and hares. People have seen them until they eat your garden, compete with your native ungulates. Then people are like, yeah, maybe they're not so great. They kind of sit on the fence of whether they're good or not. So why the split? Like, why are these all split up into different things like this? And I think it really comes down to narratives. Like axis deer equals premium wild meat. Feral hogs equal walking rototillers of doom. Even though I think they both have excellent meat. And I don't know if axis deer is that much better than all the other stuff to have this hero status. You know, it's good.
I find it hard to believe that, and I've had axis deer. We've eaten it before plenty, and it's hard to say like axis deer is better than white-tailed deer or anything like that. Like, especially, you know, depending on where you've eaten it at. I've yet to shoot one here in Hawaii, which are truly like your wild herd of axis deer that kind of roam the landscape. But definitely, like in Texas, you're probably going to find that a majority of them are probably feeder fed, which is not going to change the diet much in compared to like white-tailed deer that are feeder fed, I would imagine.
Yeah, it creates it's like they have the same introduced status, these animals, but each one has a different story, and the stories kind of build up. And I think that, you know, after hearing that axis tastes better, people will just keep saying that or keep doing it. Some people, I'm sure, really do think axis is better, and you're very much allowed to have that opinion. It doesn't mean that they deserve to be there because of that opinion. Have you noticed any hunters defending some invasives while aggressively targeting others, like further south than us, or than where I am up here?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like there's definitely a lot of conversation. I guess we'll stick to mammals for right now, but you know, there's a lot of conversation revolving around wild pigs. You know, are places like Texas sort of coveting them, and could they kind of blanket warfare and get rid of the pig problem? I think the challenge that you run into is like the public versus private land in that place, and Texas is a place that values like that privateness very much, and people do what they want to do on their land, and sort of that becomes a challenge when you talk about like statewide management of an animal or things like that. And you know, some people want to manage them, some people don't. I think also too, like the pigs, I think we'd say that, you know, you say the same thing for bear, right? There's been 3 or 4 recent stories of like bear attacks. Yeah. You know, we just published a piece about bears in Japan, the attacks on the rise, and kind of the Japanese government's turning to hunters to kind of like battle that, which is a cool story to see from, you know, another place that's not just the U.S. is like, oh, hey, hunters are pretty valuable for helping us manage this. But there's that perception too, right? Because they, you know, in doing the research and reading into it, like they didn't really do much with the bears for a while, and they were just kind of there, although they are native. But then they become a point of like, oh shoot, now they're a problem. You know, we can talk about that, as well as if you look at the coyote in North America as well. The coyote was largely pretty isolated to the plains throughout, you know, I think up until like the 1700s. And then more people started moving west and inhabiting space where the coyote kind of existed, and that conflict arose. That narrative changed, right? And they then became the villain, and in the efforts to sort of decimate the coyote, they pushed the population into the entire continent for the most part. I think there's only like 1 or 2 provinces, maybe in Canada, that don't have coyotes, whereas now they exist everywhere else.
Yeah, they're just everywhere. Yeah, so that's a really interesting point. Since we're talking about this philosophically, is a bear walking out of the native range that we've created for it and walking into a city, is that then an invasive bear? Is a bear invading our space that we've kind of carved out? Because we definitely treat a bear differently if we see one in the wild as opposed to seeing one in the city. Same with coyotes or or whatever else. So it's an interesting thing for the hyper local. Like, it does that invasive moniker kind of get put on things that are wandering into our spaces.
Yeah, it's crazy. So here's an interesting thought and figure too, is that I think too a lot of these, it's crazy. I think the pig has a very unique story when it's kind of like spread and arrival throughout North America. We'll go extended. So in Hawaii, like pig was brought here by the Polynesians as they moved and migrated and settled in Hawaii. In North America, you've got pockets of like where hogs were brought over from Europe in, we'll say, the northern part of the U.S. and sort of settled, and then some escaped and got away. And then you've got your, movement of the Spanish across the southern part of the U.S. that led to the spread of that species kind of around. But they were always kind of there, and then people kind of ate and did that. But it seems like the conversation has grown more, I think, within the last 30 years, I would say, that pigs are a problem and they continue to grow and all this other stuff. So it's very interesting that there was like a very cognizant shift of like the pigs are bad and we should decimate them and shoot them from helicopters and trap them and, kill type deal, which is interesting. But then, here in Hawaii, like pigs are perceived very different, where they're an integrated part of the culture. The pig hunting is very prominent. I was just reading something the other day. They're opening up, I think, some of the equivalent to like waterboard land for talking about opening it up for archery hunting because there are too many pigs on the property and they want to give hunters the opportunity to come in and control them before anything else. But also it's like a major food source here as well, which I think is really great that it is also integrated in that. We were talking about it when we were talking about our mammals episode of like the designation of the aoudad, the Barbary sheep in, I think it was Texas or New Mexico, one of the two, of like where they're reclassifying them. I think it was Texas, where they could now be shot from helicopters. So similar to like the pig is like they've got that invasive tag because there's so many of them. But really a lot of these origin stories for some of these exotics was like, hey, some rich guy wants to hunt this. And so he brings them here and establishes this population, which is interesting because then you've got like the nilgai, where there are more nilgai in North America than there are in their native land, and I think it's India where they're from. And which is crazy. And a lot of these species exist in higher populations in Texas than they do in their home range, which is both concerning. But I was just looking at a figure, and it popped away from me, but it was a National Geographic article talking about the examination of the exotic hunting industry in Texas, and they estimate that to bring in like $2.3 million or $3.3 million a year.
Wow.
To expand to a broader like $3 billion in like total economic value that brings to the state of Texas, which is crazy. So then you add that narrative, like you mentioned, the sort of economic value on to like what is a villain versus a celebrated species. And I think it's really wild that dollar starts to talk really, really quick. So
definitely,
I experienced it hunting here in Hawaii in Lanai, going over for mouflon sheep. Lanai is like basically their industry is tourism. It used to be a big agriculture place. There's not as much anymore. So there's really just like one little center town and then the resort area, and then people can ferry back and forth to Maui, or they can fly in from the other islands. But largely it's still like that hunting economy is there. Half the land is public land and half the land is private land. I would say roughly, it's probably not exact, but the private land, there's like one guide service that's pretty much got a foothold on it. And then the public land, you compete for tags and you can hunt with license and stuff throughout the year, but they largely, depend on hunters coming in, and it's very much like you drive out west and you see like, hey, hunters, welcome here type thing. So and they were talking about like that. It was like, oh, it's been a drought, the herds are hit hard, people are having a harder time hunting, it's more challenging, we're seeing less numbers, there's not as much places for people to stay, there's like all these challenges. But the narrative really is around coming and hunting two very prominently invasive species that are available on the landscape here. Actually more than that, because they got a ton of upland game birds birds to include pheasants and turkey, which are also non-native to Illinois. But it's interesting to see that conversation too when you tag on that economic value to it.
And even the economic value of like a personal household, like a lot of these animals, like pigs and pigeons being two great examples, were brought in to stave off, famine or food shortages or anything. They were there to be able to hunt, and people loved having them because it was an easy thing to hunt, an easy way to keep meat in the freezer, an easy way to feed your family. But now we generally have enough food. We have better food security these days, that narrative has shifted where pigeons and pigs are pests, where they used to be what saved us from starvation. Yeah, it's an interesting way from your family's household economics to the broader economics of the state or the country. It really affects all this conversation.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. But let's shift over into birds.
Yeah.
I think birds arguably probably have one of the biggest identity crises, just based on the fact that some introduced birds are icons to American hunting. Others are considered flat-out nuisances, and some are protected despite being globally invasive. So let's talk about the celebrated ones. So you've got your celebrated upland birds, your ringneck pheasant, your Hungarian partridge, chukar. These birds were intentionally released for hunting and for sporting culture. States manage habitat for them, wardens protect them, hunters revere them. There's programs where people are raising and releasing birds, and it's just wild. They're invasive in the literal sense, but culturally they're native. Like, you couldn't picture upland hunting without those birds. It's crazy. Like Pheasants Forever, organizations like that really seek to protect these birds and that culture and that part of it. The loathed introductions: European starling, house sparrow, rock pigeons. These birds compete with native species. They spread diseases. They overwhelm farms and grain sites. They live in cities where conflicts are daily. Habitat managers hate them. Farmers hate them. Even birders hate them.
If you piss off the birders, you're in trouble.
Yeah, don't make them angry. They're a wily crowd. Also, to the protected introductions. Here they are. Mute swans. Invasive? Absolutely. Beautiful? Yes. Culturally adored? Way more than they probably should. They rip up submerged vegetation, they push out native swans and ducks, but public sentiment often shields them, sometimes to the point of violence against those who'd like to eradicate them. The perception of them overshadows their value ecologically. You've got this fourth category that are the feral, wild by accident birds. These are your peafowl, your guinea fowl, Hawaii and Key West's feral chickens. Some are loved, some are hated, but none of them are native.
And you, Justin, you're now dealing with the Hawaiian chicken problem daily, because I can hear them outside your window every time we talk on the on the internet here. Why do you think some of these birds get community protection while others get eradication orders? It's such a funny thing.
I think it comes down to that cultural value thing. I think with birds too, it's a beauty and perception thing. We talk about the effects of largely the feather industry. Mm-hmm. I'll put a big question mark on that. I'm going to do a bit of speculating, but I'll tie this together in a nice little bow. So we talk about how a lot of the North American model came around to be because people were decimating species, all this. You've got the acts that protect birds, specifically, and that's because people really enjoyed adorning their clothing with different types of feathers, different colors and all that. So people were netting birds and capturing birds and killing them and plucking all their feathers and doing, all the general things of the time period to acquire the valuables they sought.
Just so Yankee Doodle could stick a feather in his hat.
Yeah, exactly.
Macaroni for some reason. Yeah.
So I think when you look at, peafowl, I would say largely people like to look at them, right? They're pretty birds.
Peacocks are always beautiful.
Yeah, they have beautiful feathers. I see them here in Hawaii around. There's several places that populations exist, and they are a huntable species here in Hawaii. The guinea fowl, I'm not sure quite how the guinea fowl came to be. I would imagine is
just an escaped farm.
Yeah,
bird,
escaped farm. The feral chickens, there's some interesting story to it, and this is sort of like the speculatory nature of it, is that I know both in Hawaii and in Key West, where I was before, and in Oklahoma, where I grew up, fighting chickens were a very prominent part of the culture for a long time, up into the point where the state said it's no longer legal to do that. And I think Oklahoma was like the last of the two. And that happened when I was probably a teenager, that they outlawed chicken fighting.
Oh, it's only that not long ago.
Yeah, not long ago.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because the speculation is the revolts in Key West was nobody wanted to kill the chickens that they invested so much time in, so they let them go. I'm not sure how it worked here in Hawaii. Probably some of the same thing, like escaped. But when you look at it, very interestingly, and I noticed this, shortly after my arrival here to Hawaii, is that the feral chickens here and the feral chickens in Key West are the same, like, sort of subspecies of chicken. They're based from the jungle fowl. Like, the roosters look the same, the hens look the same, all that. Whereas you go to other places and you look at chickens, and they're not. Oklahoma too. Growing up, there were different varieties of chickens there. You also had my cousins or uncles or aunts would call them like the wild tree chickens, which were just chickens that had probably escaped captivity and were living out in the woods, and that would roost in trees. Later, I learned in life, much like the chickens in Key West do. So therefore, they're not really that special as their own subspecies of these wild Oklahoma tree chickens. But I would say nonetheless, like, it's interesting when you see how a lot of these probably invasive birds I think probably easier to escape than larger mammals, like easier to sort of get away. But someone probably bought one, they were really nice to look at, and they just arrived on the landscape. You've got others too, like I think here in my house I've got like a nesting of Java sparrows that live in my house that we're trying to get rid of. We also have this bird that comes through our backyard. So we have a crown flower tree, and crown flower trees here are what attract the monarchs, which another questionably, is it native, is it invasive species here in Hawaii? I think the red vented, I can't remember their last word of it, but they are one of the few birds in the world that has developed the ability to eat the monarch, the worm, because monarchs are toxic to birds, most birds. So they came over there non-native to Hawaii as well, so they came over naturally and have now started decimating the monarch population here in Hawaii, which is stable and fun thought. They don't migrate like North American monarchs migrate. The Hawaiian population just always stays through. But I watched 7 of these birds come through and come through and look at the tree, and they're very menacing. They have like a pointy head, a pointy mohawk, and they have a red butt, and they're all black. And so they came through and looked. But so how do birds like that come to the landscape as well? Like, they could just kind of arrive, which is very, very interesting.
Just from a strong trade wind or something blowing them across. Tell me, are those chickens? Are you allowed to just go and grab a chicken and bring it home, throw it in a pot? Like, how does that work?
I don't know. So in Key West, there's protections that exist for them. I'm not sure here in Hawaii. I know that there's young kids run around and collecting them. I was told stories about that's like there's still pockets of chicken fighting that exist on the island, and people still pay pretty pennies for the roosters. So kids may go and catch them and resell them for $15-20 a chicken, which is kind of crazy. But I don't know if you can just pluck them up and cook them. I don't also know how they're not like plump roasters. They're pretty scraggly.
Well, they'd be good stew chickens, I think.
Yeah, probably. They probably had some good gnarly flavors in there. Yeah, but actually the ones you hear here are kind of like, there's some wooded areas kind of between us and one of the highways, and that's probably where that's where they do reside. I haven't seen many around here. I saw a rooster wander around when we first came in, but we also have feral cats here too. So they definitely compete with each other, I would say, in that regard. But yeah. What about you? What are your thoughts sort of on the bird?
Just in terms of why some get protection and others don't. I think it all comes to public perception and the value. I think one of the big ones around here is like that the mute swan. It's crazy that we're protecting them. It's crazy. They're so destructive ecologically. They don't belong here. They're brought over because they come from Avon River or whatever, the Shakespeare kind of whole thing. But they're beautiful and graceful, and and people want them. But then we have the trumpeter swans, which I think are even more beautiful, and they belong here on the landscape, and they're fighting for space with these things. And it's a lot of people who don't understand the ecology, or if they do, like a lot of hunters, they purposely shut their ears and go la 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 when you're talking about it because they don't want to hear about it. And there's some birds, like I don't know what effects ringneck pheasants really have on the ecology of a place. Like I don't think they leave much of an imprint. And in that case, is it bad to have them around if they're so beloved and they bring in so much money and they fit into their own little niche without making a lot of damage? I don't know. There's a lot of questions, but I think that if we were to go about discussing eradication, there's definitely birds that deserve to be eradicated before others, and some of those upland game fowl would be pretty low on the list compared to starlings or swans or stuff like that.
Yeah, I feel like swans are at the top of your list, aren't they?
Yeah.
Did you get chased? Did you get chased by them as a young man?
Yeah, they swans killed by parents and drove me into the cave.
Adam, every superhero has an origin story, so the swan's yours.
Yeah, I'll be the black swan. Anyways, let's talk about fish.
For almost 50 years, Midway USA has been America's go-to source for just about everything for shooting, hunting, and the outdoors. Go to midwayusa.com to see our latest deals and promotions and take advantage of our super fast same-day shipping. If you need a cooler, a new fishing rod, another rifle, ammo, or a reloading press, you can find it all at midwayusa.com. Thanks for your business. Knives, machetes, saws and shears, multi-tools, shovels, swords, axes, spears, hatchets, and tomahawks. If it cuts, snips, slices, or chops, Midway USA has it. Find great gift ideas in our huge selection of pocket knives and other everyday carry folding knives. Make a statement or create a family legacy with one of our top-of-the-line hunting knives. We've got a great selection of manual and electric sharpeners too. With just about everything for the outdoors, check out midwayusa.com.
All right. So, this category might be the most ironic of all. Some of the most beloved fish in North America are introduced, they're stocked, they're planted, they're managed, and they're celebrated. Yet other fishes are painted as ecological disasters.
Yeah, so they're amongst the most protective invasives on Earth, the fish are, it's pretty interesting. Let's start with the beloved introductions. These are the fish that are stocked on purpose, defended passionately. Some of these are from elsewhere. Some belong in North America, but not everywhere in North America, so they're still considered invasive. Some examples include the rainbow trout, native to the West, introduced to the East. Just made some last night. It's delicious. I understand why people want them around. We have the brown trout from Europe. A lot of fly fishermen love brown trout, as well as the brook trout, native only to the east, but stocked in the west as well. And then lake trout, stocked outside native range. Notice these are all trout. People really, really, really like their trout. Anglers love them. Agencies and governments invest millions in stocking them. No one calls them invasive, even when they displace native cutthroat, like all the native trout. Then we have the aquatic villains. This is your common carp, your Asian carp, which include the big head silver grass carps, your snakeheads. You can get into tilapia. We can get into, largemouth bass, and there's a lot of other kind of fish that, made their way around that don't really belong where they are. These fish sometimes get treated like monsters despite being introduced for food production or for vegetation control. Sometimes the only thing in the way of a villain becoming a hero is its name. People have built a certain distasteful perception around the common carp in North America. Despite its hero status in Europe, people love carp in Europe, hate them here for some reason. But when Asian carp began invading American waters, they were immediately vilified despite bearing little resemblance to the common carp. I think just the name carp was enough to set people off. That's my personal opinion. I don't know if that's the real case, but was it the name that did it? Same thing with the snakehead. Would a fish named, say, like jumping bass or something have caused so much distaste as something called snakehead, which just conjures up these like gross kind of images? So sometimes I think it's even the name that causes public perception to shift and can influence how we look at an invasive species. If it was like the snakehead carp trout, Would anyone be angling after it? I don't know. We also have what we call the elegant outsider. So this is kind of like the, Chinook and coho salmon that can be found in the Great Lakes. These are also stocked, also non-native, also deeply beloved. Atlantic salmon have traditionally been found in Lake Ontario and everything, but there's now Pacific salmon that don't belong there. There should be no way for Pacific salmon to make its way into the Great Lakes system, but people love them. There's places where people are getting into fist fights because there's so many of them lined up, fly fishing the same little pools where they're coming in to breed. There's like pictures of it, and there's just a person every 2 feet just all throwing lines in the same little pools after these things. So why the double standard between all these fish? We have trout, that equals tradition, delicious, whatever. We have carp, that's a trash fish. I rarely meet anyone who's excited about carp, and I think that's too bad. But even if both of those fish uproot ecosystems, one's beloved and one's not. I also think that casual racism may also play a part, potentially, because many plant and fish species with Asiatic names, like the Japanese knotweed, Asian carp, etc., tend to get a worse rap than European transplants. There's some deeper thinking going into that. I don't know if that's the real truth, but I think there's just some feelings that things from Asia are worse than things from Europe, even though ecologically it makes no difference. And I've heard people talk about these invaders coming en masse from Asia, but really, the North American transplants that are invasive elsewhere are way worse. Like Asia is just crawling with North American plants and animals that don't belong there. So, it goes back and forth. Why do you think anglers embrace some of those non-native fish so fiercely, even though they know they don't actually belong there?
I think it's probably the same in the fishing community as it is in the hunting community. Like they become sort of we didn't have that here, we wanted it here, now we've got it here, and we want to keep it here type deal. And also too, like, they talk about, especially you talk about rainbow trout. Like I remember fishing for rainbow trout in San Diego when I lived there. And it came the famed tailwalkers of like Nebraska or South Dakota or whatever fishery they were hatched in. They, purposely coveted to bring down to generate this sort of like explosive fight and, meat quality subpar, like whatever. Like the chicken tender of the of the fishing food world, but I think that it's I think they became part of the landscape because in places where they were originally part of the landscape, they were decimated, they were overfished, they were wiped out, and people wanted a solution. I don't think for consumption. I think more for sport, which you can argue, and I would argue that probably a lot of probably going to take some shots for this, but a lot of the popularity of upland is probably largely to sport and not as much culinary in nature.
Totally agree. And yeah, same with the fish. Like there's, how much shit you get for eating a bass in some places, eating a largemouth or smallmouth bass, even though they might not even belong in the place. Like, or if you're harvesting fish out of a fly fishing area instead of releasing them, like there's a lot of shit you can catch for that. And it's that sporting world, and the sporting world has a lot of money, and it's pretty persuasive in terms of lobbying governments and stuff. And it's part of what's shaping this whole conversation. It's not just the hunting to eat, but hunting for sport. And I'm not throwing shade on
I was going to say
act of doing that.
We're not trying to make villains out of those folks.
No, but they're important pillar of what's like of all these things we're talking about. I think they do sway things. And that really brings us to like kind of the heart of our episode, the psychology of the acceptance of these things, like why perception matters. Why do some why do some invasive species get branded as game or tradition or part of the landscape, protected wildlife, while others are pests, trash, monsters, destroyers? And really we're just labeling animals kind of willy-nilly from place to place, and they can fall into either of those groups. And can you let us into on the some of the history and everything about that, Justin?
Yeah, sure. So most hunters and anglers, and they inherit a landscape from their parents or grandparents, and if pheasants, stock trout, or axis deer were already part of the scene, they feel native, even if they're not. Once the species is wrapped into family stories, old photos, local identity, any attempt to control or remove it can feel like an attack on tradition. So people start to take that a little personally. An example is pheasant season being cut back upsets people way more than a starling control program, even if both birds are introduced. Some of the aesthetics, right? Animals that are big, graceful, colorful, or majestic. Loose quotes: swans, feral horses, pheasants, peafowl. They attract sympathy and protection even when they're rough on ecosystems. Conversely, animals seen as dirty, ugly, or sneaky, rats, feral pigs, starling, carp. Let's throw in there the snakes in Florida, like iguanas. They're easier to justify culling hard. And I've seen the emergence of the videos across social media of people cruising around with air rifles shooting iguanas out of people's backyards in Florida, right? But if you were to do that for, like, let's say peafowl or swans, people would lose it.
You're going to jail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Public reaction often follows looks more than science. Fluffy cygnets and big-eyed deer get social media outrage of cold, while equally damaging species that aren't cute barely register. Managers end up in weird positions of having to sell removal plans differently based on an animal's face.
We really saw that in animal conservation around the world from the 90s, like the WWF, World Wildlife Fund, saving pandas.
I thought we were talking about World Wrestling Federation.
Yeah.
Sorry.
the real WWF. But, they're saving these charismatic species like pandas and tigers and whatever, but then there's other ones that are actually more influential in the landscape that can make a huge difference, that are ugly or small and they don't get attention and they can't get money for them no matter what. So the aesthetics play a huge role in that.
Yeah, it's wild. Number 3, utility. So Axis or Sika might mess with native vegetation, but they bring in hunting dollars, meat, and recreation. So their downsides are often downplayed. Stock trout hammer native fish, but generate license sales and tourism, so their presence is treated as a feature, not an annoyance. Utility shapes language. Game animal versus nuisance species is often just a reflection of whether humans feel like they're getting something back. And then number 4, the final, narrative. Animals released for sport or stocked intentionally come with a proud story. We brought them here for hunting and fishing. That positive origin sticks. Species that arrived through messy pathways, pet trade escapes, ballast water, farm runoff, are framed as mistakes or accidents, so they start with a villain arc. Their origin story is not, it's not just...
It's like my Black Swan origin story.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's talk about Superman and his invasiveness into America.
Yeah. Lex Luthor is the true hero in this sense.
Yeah. So once an animal is publicly labeled as an invader, pest, or hero, that label is hard to shake, even if science later complicates the picture. Hunters and anglers and agencies end up repeating these narratives: trash fish, flying rats, iconic game bird, which reinforces perception long after the facts have evolved. And I would say we ourselves in the outdoor media space are equally guilty of this as well. That famed picturesque pheasant plastered across field and stream, or all these different places. Like, does it get people out hunting? Yes. Does it get people out buying magazines and listening to podcasts and reading articles? Yes. Is it in line with what's great for our ecosystem? TBD. So, I don't know. I feel like we've covered... This wraps up the series in a very great way. I really appreciate this. Yeah, we started off the series, working our way through all the different sort of categories of animals, talking about the mammals, the reptiles, the birds, the fish, the vegetation, what it means to be invasive, what are invasive, what to do with the invasive, and really how to bring it to the table and use it as a resource. And I think that conversation needs to continue as we start to look at that, go out, target those species, do all that. We also had our line of shirts and stickers that we ran kind of earlier in the year for different invasive species throughout, and we chose conservation groups that were either seeking to build the habitat that those invasive species were living in or just outright battling those invasive species. So please go over. We're going to pull those shirts down at the end of the year. They've run their course. We also, those conservation organizations, we're tied to each one, and we're donating a portion of those sales to each of the conservation organizations at the close of the year. So go buy them now. You still got a little bit of time to get them printed and shipped for the holidays if you want to get your friends and family some cool stuff. There's like lionfish and chips. There's iguana tacos, brown trout / brook trout shirt.
Yeah. Oh, the
snakehead one. Yeah, there's like a bunch of cool ones. So go check those out.
And they're actually fantastic shirts. I gotta say, like, even if you're not planning on buying one, just go look at them, because I think Justin did a great job. They're hilarious. They're striking. Everywhere I wear them, people talk about them.
Yeah.
And it brings up this good conversation about invasive species and eating invasive species. So go definitely take a look at them. They're great.
Yeah. Adam, any last thoughts before we close out here?
Yeah, I think after all this discussion we've had around invasive species, I think it's time for you to, like, when talking about them or listening to people talk about them, consider where your feelings are coming from, where your emotions are coming from. If you call stuff sky carp and this and that, and you're perpetuating a kind of thing, a system that's appreciating some animals over others, and it doesn't really make sense when you get down to the bottom of it, or it may make sense, but you should be thinking of that rather than just perpetuating this kind of thing, just like that narrative that Justin just was talking about. I think we need to be questioning why we consider some of these things invasive and others not, and I think we should be using cooking as a way of managing some of them too. And a lot of the things that you might think are disgusting or whatever are just the perceptions and traditions that are shaping that. You know, in China or in Britain, they're not considered disgusting. Why is that? It's worth looking into. And I think just kind of monitor your emotions and monitor the way you talk about some of these things, and kind of get down to seeing why you actually do. And hopefully you learn something from all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks everybody for listening out there. Whatever podcast platform you listen to, punch that 5-star button. Leave us a review. Tell us we're doing right, or tell us we're doing wrong. See everybody next time. Ciao.
Want to plan your next fishing trip without the hassle? FishingBooker.com is the best way to find and book a fishing charter anywhere in the world. Whether you're chasing trophy fish or just looking for a family day on the water, FishingBooker makes it simple, fast, and secure. With thousands of experienced guides, verified reviews, and 24/7 customer support, FishingBooker takes the guesswork out of planning. Visit FishingBooker.com and book your trip today. FishingBooker. Fishing trips made easy.
Hit the road for fun and heartwarming fishing adventures with the Real American Road Trip.
I just want to hook up one time. I just need to hook up one time.
Catch the Waypoint Original Series every Tuesday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern on the Waypoint TV channel. Waypoint TV, your destination for outdoor entertainment.
I did get a bite. I have gotten a bite. I did feel it.